there we go.
Okay.
There we go. We're good to go. All right. So the theme this year is communication in history. We all are familiar with communication. We know there are lots of different types of communication. I like that the dictionary says that communication is a process of exchanging information. It's a way we interact with each other. And so really what I think what we're going to do for this is just walk through some different ways of communicating and look at some different ideas within each of those kinds of modes of communication. So have any of you, or how many of you have watched the video on the NHD website? Anybody? Can't see you. You have? Okay. Jessica. Great. So some of this may sound familiar to you. I'm going to pull from that. I'm going to pull too from just some of my own thoughts that I've had about communication. And then we will walk through each of those. So first off, actually, before we get to that, so just some questions that I've been thinking of different ways to think about this. So how do people exchange information? And how do people interact with each other in those exchanges? How have modes of communication changed over time? How have those changes in communication shaped the present? Because we really need, when our students are coming up with their topics, they need to think about how what they're talking about has influenced the present day. What happens when people fail to communicate? This is one thing that I think I like to do, encourage students to do when we're talking about topics, is have them think about things from the opposite side. And what impacts of communication or failed communication had on history. So some questions to keep in mind. Now, types of communication. So the first one is probably one of the most obvious, and that is written communications. So what are some examples or types of written communication that you guys can think of or that are there? Anybody?
So is like artwork going to be in the written communication category or no?
I think it could be. I have it, just me personally, I have it separated out into a different category, but that is a possibility. Yeah. What else?
Letters, telegraphs.
Poetry. We just did a study about Emma Lazarus's poem that's on the Statue of Liberty and what that communicated about immigration. So I think I'm going to use that as our example of like a topic example. So like a poem.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one, Jessica. Anybody else?
I don't know if this fits at all, but I have just been doing a little bit of history with my little one, and I just didn't realize how revolutionary books were. So I know that's not quite written communication, but just how much more transportable they were. We were just talking through, and she was like, oh, that's a lot easier than a clay tablet. And I thought, as you often do at NHD, I was like, that's a great NHD project.
Yeah, yeah. That's one of the examples I've seen is the is Johannes Gutenberg, and the example of the creation of printing press, invention of printing press.
Mm-hmm. Another good one I thought of, everyone always wants to do women's suffrage every year, which I love, but you know, it's every year they want to do it. And we always do a really neat lesson about the note that the representative from Tennessee's mom put in his pocket. I'm sure you all have heard that. Do you all know the story I'm talking about?
Yes, put the cat, the help Miss Cat put the rat in ratification, Henry Burns.
Yes, when Harry Burns's mom stuck the note in his pocket that made him the deciding vote for women's suffrage. And it's this little note from his mom, and he was like 25, and he was the deciding vote from that tiny note. So I think something like that would be a good one for a suffrage topic.
Yeah, that's really good. So we mentioned the letters. I've got a couple of examples for you here of just some collections of letters that I've come across in the past that were really good. This one's called An Uncommon Soldier. And it is the story of a woman named Sarah Rosetta Wakeman, who, or AKA Private Lyons Wakeman, because she dressed up as a man and fought in the Civil War. And these are her letters that she was writing back and forth to her family, not back and forth, these are just her letters, but telling her story, and talking about how the travel, she went from Pennsylvania, I believe, and made it all the way to Louisiana before she was killed in the war. So a good collection there. Or in more along the lines of world history, this one's called The Pastons. This is a family during the War of the Roses, and it's just letters of their family talking about their political views, their estates. I mean, there's all kinds of different information in here these are just collection of their family letters that our students could look at. Along the lines of the Marshalls, of course, I have to talk about some of the Marshall stuff. There are some great letters. There's a letter from James Meredith to the Justice Department, where he wrote to them telling them that Ole Miss would not accept him because of the color of his skin, and that he was seeking the help of the Justice Department to do that. So all of those examples of written documents. Anybody else have anything like that they want to share? Any thoughts you've had that would go along with written communication? All right, well, we will move on to the next one. So the next one is spoken communication. So what are some examples of how we communicate through speaking?
I was thinking of songs and how songs can be in the spoken communication. I thought that might get students a little more interested when they thought of how music could be a part of it. Or even, I know some of my winners last year did an actress and used you can use their words, maybe they spoke on screen, that changed things.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that one. And students really tend to like music, gravitate toward music. So that's a really good example. What else?
One of the things that's come up in as we meet at the national level about how people could do performance in a virtual world, or in a world where maybe they have to practice in a virtual way, is they're really encouraging students to do radio dramas. And so I think you could actually do some great spoken performances on the power of some of the early radio dramas. So I'm thinking of some of the early radio shows like the Goldbergs, which normalized like immigration and Jewishness. And so I think that also is fun because it's pop culture, and then the students could actually reenact some of the radio plays. And then likewise, you could do a super cool monologue based on something that would have been on the radio, where the student kind of switched back and forth between narrator and the actual speaker.
Yeah.
That would be neat with like the War of the Worlds, the reading of the War of the Worlds. That'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a good one. Another thing that came to mind with radio is the, not necessarily on the performance side of things, but just for a possible topic would be the fireside chats, the FDR fireside chats. Anything else? What else we got?
Okay, I'm just gonna nerd out one more time. I'm sorry, Leslie.
Please do.
I would say that early radio, the two kinds of music that you see being really popular are country, though it's not called country yet, and blues. And so I think students who love either descendants of either music could talk about how these early radio stations, which had to broadcast from Mexico, basically created popular music because people could tune in the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind with music is I had a professor in graduate school that used a lot of the Vietnam era music to talk about the messages that they were sending through the songs that they were that they were recording. Buffalo Springfield, For What It's Worth, and some of those others that really sent a very clear message about what their feelings on the war were. Some other things that come to mind, political speeches, or any other political or presidential political speeches, how presidents or political figures try to communicate through that. Presidential debates go back a few decades, and so students could look at those and how presidential candidates have used those to communicate their messages. There's other examples out there of recorded conversations, of course. So anybody else that spark anything for you?
I think it could be interesting to look at how the spoken word has been misinterpreted. There's a lot of quotes people use for different causes that aren't actually what the speaker intended. And that would be a neat thing to look at. Like, I love this quote, but it's not what they meant. The quote of, well-behaved women seldom make history. That's not what they said or intended, but it's become used for so many things. So I think something like that could be neat to study.
Yeah, definitely. Like the kind of the consequences of the miscommunication or of the misinterpretation.
Whoa, you could do a super cool project just on translators, like important translators, like Sacagawea, or, oh gosh, there was one guy who translated for Mao, who was a Chinese American for like 40 years. He's like, the only reason I didn't get killed was because I didn't have any English. So that would be a cool
I'm going to say the name wrong, but like, I know Cortez, when he went to the Aztecs, took a native lady as his translator.
Yeah.
Malinche, Malinche, M-A-L-I-N-C-H-E.
Yep.
And
that
so,
actually, and that actually brings us into the next category I was talking about, which the next category I have is language. And language barriers, things like sign language. We have the creation of sign language. We have the creation of, with Sequoia, of the Cherokee alphabet, a new way for them to communicate. Language could also get into immigration and language barriers with immigrants coming into the United States. Another one I saw, and this might have been on the video, but it caught my attention because it was interesting, was the Hawaiian language being banned, the ban of languages, and what that does after when the Hawaiian language was banned after the Hawaiian takeover, after the last queen. So yeah, and I think the translating thing sounds a really interesting way to look at language also. What else? Anybody else got other ideas on that one?
The same thing with the Welsh language, what happened over there in the UK. Also Braille, looking at Braille.
I don't know, it might be kind of hard, but I actually had the thought too about the death of languages. Like, and a lot of those are so slow over time that maybe that would be hard to do something with. But there are language like Latin and other languages that have just gone out of use, and if there is some kind of topic that could be done around those.
There's some really inspiring topics that could be done, especially for people who wanted to do Native people of Arkansas, because the Osage, the Quapaw, and the Cherokee have all since the 1970s had these projects to bring their languages back. So like the Osage have a Montessori preschool that's all Osage. And then I think the coolest, it's like Sequoia Part 2, the Cherokee, before Steve Jobs passed, the Cherokee, this might not be far enough back, but the Cherokee got him to agree to make Cherokee one of the languages you could text in on your iPhone. And so in some of the indigenous schools, you're allowed to text in class if you use Cherokee. But if you text in English, you get in trouble. It's just kind of amazing.
That's actually a really good idea. That's a really good incentive to make them learn Cherokee.
But we might have more than one Sequoia project, but it'd be cool to have one one that talked about, you looked at Sequoia, but then fast forwarded to.
Yeah, and that would be a great time. I mean, I mentioned before about making sure that projects are tied to their effects on the present. And so that would be, they could take that back and then just use that as their look forward. Yeah, I think that could make a really interesting project.
And that thing with Steve Jobs made me think about math as language, especially with the development of computers and mathematics as our current language in the 21st century. Or even the, made me think of, I guess it was the 80s when we sent that recording out to space, hoping it would reach someone. And that's also very, mathematics as a language. I think you could do all kinds of things with that.
Those are great ideas, Jessica. Love that. Anybody else with language? All right, the next one I have is gatherings. So typically I think when we think of gatherings, we think of protests. But what other kind of gatherings are there?
Probably, I think a big one's going to be Seneca Falls, I imagine will be a big one this year, or things like the Continental Congress and those types of things.
Yeah, definitely conventions, things like Seneca Falls. Also thought about, things like Potsdam, following World War II. World's fairs are a good example of gatherings from 1851. And then, with that, they can talk about that. Those are, even though we don't hear about them much, they are still continuing today.
You can think of a lot of religious gatherings, like First and Second Great Awakening both have a lot of cool documents about those meetings. And then some of the indigenous religious movements like Ghost Dance. It seems like up until recently, religion spread through gatherings. So you could do some cool stuff around that.
Oh, yeah. Jessica mentioned Seneca Falls. Reminded me, I have a copy of a newspaper article here that was written after Seneca Falls, and it just caught my attention, and we're all women here, so I think we'll appreciate this. He's the author of this article. He says, "We need not say that we think the movement excessively silly. Nevertheless, many of our readers will have a curiosity." So I was like, wow. Okay.
Nice.
I
think of the British limiting the number of people that can gather, during the time, leading up to the American Revolution, and the impact when they go back and write the Bill of Rights and how they make sure that is protected.
I've talked about protests again. I'll throw the marshals in there. We have there's the Vietnam protest at the Pentagon in 1967, where they surround the Pentagon or trying to storm the Pentagon. You can talk about the messages that were being sent through that. But they were at the Lincoln Memorial and on the Mall before they moved to the Pentagon. There's Ole Miss again, the riot, and the protest that turned into a riot at Ole Miss there. So lots of different things. Those kinds of things that the marshals have been involved in as well. Anybody else on that one? Okay. Now, Jessica, you mentioned art earlier, so I have a whole category for images, and so I have art in there, photographs, political posters, political cartoons. I think political cartoons could be a really fun topic. I found this one. It says, "Wonder how long the honeymoon will last." See who that is? I don't know if you're familiar with the work of Clifford Berryman, political cartoonist. I love his stuff. I have a book of his stuff. So what else? What other art, what other images do we have as far as, or can you think of?
I think of all the things in World War II that like Dr. Seuss and Walt Disney did. The kids know Dr. Seuss and Walt Disney. So I think letting them use that for their war propaganda would draw students in more, since those are names they know.
Yeah, there's lots of good World War II propaganda posters, that kind of stuff. I also found these, all the loose lip sink ships posters and stuff that were being created. What else?
In the poster realm, if students wanted to think about things related to the pandemic, maybe they don't, but maybe they want to get away from it. But there's so much in public health with posters.
Mm-hmm.
And the posters are really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen some going around, like from the 1918 flu and things like that. Yeah.
There's also some really great new work out on Dorothea Lange. So, you know, she has that migrant mother photo that's really famous, but there's some really accessible stuff that a middle schooler could read about who she was as a photographer and her work on a lot of different issues. She was a really interesting person.
I think this can be a good one for what Jessica was talking about too, with the misinterpretation. Images can be, you know, they can be taken out of context as well. They can be misinterpreted. They can be up to interpretation, and how one person interprets an image might be different from another person. So I think there could be some interesting ways to look at that as well.
Is my sound coming through okay?
You've been in and out a little bit.
Okay, I'll try to say one. I was pre-pandemic at the Georgia O'Keeffe Museum, and you always think of Georgia O'Keeffe as her paintings mean something deeper. And there was just this fabulous video of her straight up in the museum saying, "They're flowers, and that's really all I mean for them to be." And it was her just straight up saying, "They're flowers, period." Making something out of it. And so that's what that reminds me of, is sometimes we misinterpret what they mean.
Yeah, that's great. They're just flowers. Trying to ascribe meaning when it's not there. Oh, that's good. All right, and then the last one I have is called, I've got it down as acts of communication by an individual. So, and what made me think of it was I saw the photo, and you guys have probably seen them, or their photos of the monk in Vietnam doing the self-immolation, where he set himself on fire for trying to send a message to the regime about the treatment of the Buddhists in Vietnam at the time versus the Catholic regime. So, you know, the message that he was sending. But, you know, there are other things that I thought of. This could be, you know, somebody like Timothy McVeigh, who commits an act of terrorism. What is he trying to do, or what is he trying to show? The assassination of Archduke Ferdinand starts World War I, and the Bosnian that committed that assassination. So, so things like assassinations, acts of terrorism. So individual communication, I guess, is just what I'm going for there. So what do we got there?
So Jessica had the idea of
Whoop.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jessica. Nope, you're breaking up again. I saw she said.
Well, my sound may be off.
There you are.
Yeah.
What was it, Story, you said she had on there?
I was just saying, she said the raised fist at the Olympics when the guys were in Mexico City, you know, in '68, and the three of them raised their fist in the Black Power salute. I think that would she didn't say this, but I'm thinking she said that, I thought, ooh, that will really resonate with students with Colin Kaepernick and the NBA right now.
Yeah.
The British suffragette who threw herself on a horse racetrack and killed herself in the name of women's suffrage.
I had not heard that story. That's
either. That's Jessica. You might have to
Wow.
have one of your students do that. That's dramatic.
Yeah. Anybody, anything else? We lost Erica. All right. Well, those are the categories I have. I think, and we kind of touched on this a little bit with talking about events. The thing to remember with the topics is just that they need to be at least 25 years old. Is typically the guideline that we use. Drop my paper, sorry. And that they need to touch on, they need to be at least 25 years old, but they need to touch on the present day, be able to connect to the present day. I think one of the things we'll see with students is we'll have students that want to look at email and things that maybe aren't quite, because there have been so many changes in modes of communication, even over the last 25 years, that you'll have some students that want to look at some of those newer forms of communication, which could, I think, be possible. They just need to go back to the roots of those modes of communication and be able to come forward. And they need to be able to show that legacy of a true impact of how those forms of communication have changed things, kind of like those questions I asked at the beginning, the impact that they've had, how they've changed things, failures that those modes of communication have had, I think can also be something that students can look at. So next, was just going to move on to the categories I'm not going to go into like exhaustive amount on the categories, but just some things that I always like to point out about the categories. Obviously, we have 5 categories. We have exhibits, documentaries, papers, websites, and performances. All the categories can be done in groups except for papers. They must be done individually. This is going to be an interesting year with students, if they're trying to social distance to work on. So some of these will work better than others, I think, for that. I always like to tell students with exhibits, especially exhibits, people often think of exhibits as the easiest category when really they're the hardest category, because you always have more competition when you have an exhibit. So it's harder to make yourself stand out among the exhibits because you usually have so many others to compete with. Websites, just reminding students, especially if they're veteran NHD students, that now they have to use the NHD website to do their websites on. If they've done it in the past and they've come back and they don't realize that we're not using Weebly anymore, that we're using the new NHD website. Documentaries, I actually had the thought with documentaries and papers, these are probably going to be the 2 best for those that need that little that need to really keep the social distancing. There are platforms out there, and I had one and now it's just left me. There are some platforms out there, that they can work on, where they can get on it from wherever they are at home. If you have virtual students that are doing documentaries, then that way they could just collaborate together through that platform. And I can get y'all the name of that platform that I'm thinking of. I have it written down. I just had it in my head and now it's not there, because you know how that works. Performances, I like to tell people, along with papers, remind students that, just like I said, exhibits, we think they're the easiest, but they're actually the hardest. Performances and papers, a lot of times students think of as the harder categories, but as far as competition go, they usually have less competition because those are usually the smaller categories. And I always like to remind students that if you're doing a performance, then that's great. You just have to write an original script. If you love Hamilton, that's fantastic, but you can't go copy and paste the script from Hamilton and make that your performance. You have to write your performance and you have to perform it. It must be original. I think I had a copy and paste from Hamilton a school last year, or a couple years ago. So what else do you guys have? What questions do you have, or what else would you like to hear about on the theme or the categories or anything else? Anybody? Jessica had another. Oh yeah, I just saw her comment. So much in the theme and the world of advertising would also relate to the theme. Yeah, so advertising would be a really good source of topics. That could be a lot. That could be fun for performances too. Things with advertising. Anybody else?
So I think Jess, when you're saying I got some, I think Jess is saying that you have some questions, Jess.
No, I was trying to say I got some great ideas and my thumb slipped.
Got it. So Renee, I'm hearing you saying you are new to this and you want to find some information online. I would say that if you want to, put your email into the chat, I can email you the links to the new rule book and the theme book and the theme video. I would also sign up for, if you are a Facebook person at all, got it. You could sign up for NHD Arkansas on Facebook and just regular National History Day on Arkansas. And then I just got a note from the Minnesota coordinators who have probably run the biggest state workshops in the United States, because everyone in Minnesota has to do this, that they will be running a workshop for brand new teachers on the last day of September and the first 2 days of October. So I'm not sure that you are a brand new teacher. Yeah, you say you're new. So that might be something to just help get you up to speed and think about sort of planning backwards from the state contest and hitting all the deadlines and that kind of stuff. We also, and Jess, I think you have probably have started or just about to start your workshop. Renee, we just got notice that we have 2 additional scholarships. And I would say this to you too, Leslie, if you have any interest in taking it. National History Day is offering 2 additional scholarships to Arkansas for project-based learning. So just basically the weekly breakdown of what you do in NHD from start to finish. And I just did a workshop this summer. It was amazing.
Okay. Yeah, and Renee, I'll add to that too. I have a couple of meetings set up already where I'm just doing one-on-one meetings with people that are interested in History Day. If you are interested in doing something like that, where we can just talk, I can walk you through things, and I'm sure Story would be willing to do that also.
I would probably listen in to learn, since I'm so new. I'd be like, and then in September at the end, what do you do, Leslie?
You can just ask questions away. I'm happy to do something like that. I have one coming up this Friday with someone that is new, so happy to do that.
Yeah. Renee, is there any chance that I don't know, Leslie, if you would want to consolidate, but could you do like a little miniature meeting with the 4 of us if it was a time that was good for Renee and good for this other teacher?
Sure.
Okay. What time is the meeting? Do you
know? It is on Friday at 3, I believe.
Okay.
She's not I'm sorry, she's not a teacher. She's a librarian.
Oh yeah. Okay.
A regional librarian that's wanting to be able to work with students when they come in asking for help. So,
okay.
But you can do that.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
can't
you could
agree
do it
with
at
you.
4. I'm actually free at 4. Is that an okay time for you, Leslie?
Yeah, that's fine. I could actually just meet with her and then flip over and
Okay,
meet
because I
with
had a
Bob.
student meeting at 3, but I can do 4.
Yeah, yeah. And her questions, like I said, because she's the librarian, hers are going to maybe a little bit different, so it might be better to split that.
Okay. So Renee, I'll follow up with an email that I'll loop Leslie in on, just sort of restating what I think we're doing, and then Leslie can correct anything I'm getting wrong. And I'll also include the information on the National History Day Scholarship for project-based learning. And then as soon as I have the Minnesota information, I'm actually going to share that with everyone. And I'll make sure, Renee, have you been getting the big mail outs that have like a little Arkansas at the top and it says National History Day? Okay, I'm going to put you on the mailing list then. We will get you hooked in. We'll get you started.
Yes, probably more than you want. we tend to be a little overwhelming. What else? Anybody got anything else they would like to? Questions, more topic thoughts that have come up? Like I said, that's why I like to have these themed conversations, because you never know what's going to spark something from someone else or what other things we can come up with. It's just good to get, they're just good brainstorming sessions to get your brain going.
That is cool.
The next one we have scheduled is next Tuesday, and it is going to be on primary sources and finding primary sources in a stay-at-home world. So I will try to, my plan is to just show you different collections of resources that are online, where to find them, both American history and world history, since sometimes those are hard to find. And I'll probably just do a screen share for that one and walk you through some websites. So if you haven't registered for that one, email me and let me know you want to be there.
Leslie, thank you so much. I've got so many great ideas to share with other teachers, so thank you.
Me too. I learn from these just as much as anybody else. So.
Renee and Jess, thanks for coming.
Yes. And Renee will be in touch. And Jessica, if there's anything we can do for you, let us know.
And Leslie, it'll upload to the cloud, and then I think it'll send me an email. So once it's all uploaded, I'll send all the information on the cloud-based video to you.
All right, that sounds good. All right, well, I will sign off. So thanks, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you next week or the next couple ones after that. So you guys have a good night.
Take care.
Bye.